If you listen to the show, you already know that we cannot exist without our sponsors. They are the ones who make things happen behind the scenes. So let's acknowledge Fuji Sports. We've been working with these guys for a while now, not only as far as this podcast is concerned, but also at the RŌL Academy. We've had their gear. I personally use their gis. What a phenomenal product.
Yeah, I mean, Jiu Jitsu, Judo, MMA, tape, bags, anything you need for your Jiu Jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Let's talk RŌL TV. There's so much content on there. It's ridiculous at this point. But I think what is even more intriguing, as time went on during the project, we've been recording most of the events that were taking place here at RŌL Academy. At this point, I mean, we have guys like Chris Howder, Armin Fati, Rafael Lovato Sr., and Pete the Greek. I mean, there are so many different events that we've kind of recorded it. Don't you think that's amazing? I mean, points of reflection and kind of going back for all the students to see what really happened and refresh their memory.
Yeah, I think it's great, you know, being able to go back and look at all these high-level practitioners, Octavio Cudo, like one of the names you didn't mention. And I mean, just these guys that have been doing this for so long come in, teach these amazing seminars and workshops, and it's all recorded and there for you to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get additional savings on all this, type in code RŌL Radio at the coupon and get additional 30% off of your membership.
Nice. Go to rolacademy.tv. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please remember to hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. On this episode, Amal Easton discusses his love of different cultures and traveling, his start in BJJ prior to its growth in the United States, the challenges different generations face on and off the mats, the need to see other people's perspectives, and a ton more. Here's the RŌL Radio with a Renzo Gracie black belt, avid skier and outdoorsman, owner of the hugely successful Easton Training Centers in Colorado, and creator of Easton Online, Amal Easton.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live.
Yeah, here we go again.
How are you, Mr. Pond?
I'm all right. I'm fine. Everything's going swimmingly.
You got the button pressed. Everything's going.
Yeah. You know, I was reflecting on things a little bit earlier today, just about how good things are for me. So, yeah.
Are they good?
Yes. I can't complain.
You know, this was the first time as we were kind of sitting here and you were recording the intro for another episode. This was the first time where I actually witnessed you doing that. Yeah, I saw the magic behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's pretty lame. 5 takes, I think it took me.
That's not bad. I will be doing 15, 20.
Well,
I mean, you have a little system going here. So good for you.
It works well.
Yeah.
I've only done it 132
30
times.
sounds.
So maybe by 150 I'll have it down.
Is that the case?
Yeah, we'll see. I'll keep working on it. It's a work
so
in progress.
what's so amazing about your day today that you said you appreciate?
I don't know. Something
good?
made me think about complaining. I don't know what it was. What do I have to complain about? Not that much. And my complaints are very minimal in scope to what other people have going on. I'm a very empathetic person, believe it or not, even though I try and come off as a callous jerk a lot, just for comedy's sake or fun, for having fun. But no, man, for everything that's going wrong in my life right now, it's not that big. It's not that hard to deal with. And other people have it a lot worse. So I think when I reflect and keep that in perspective, you know, if having to take a car back because something was wrong with it is the worst part of my day, my day's not that bad. So,
good for you.
Yeah,
good for you. Well,
I'll see if I can keep that outlook till
to the end of the day.
Tonight. Yeah, 12 more hours when I go to bed. We'll see how it goes. Let's get started here.
Let's get started. Amal Easton in the house. Thank you for joining us. You know, I'm glad you're here. We had a little disconnect at the beginning, but you're here, and I'm glad to actually talk to you. It appears to me as I look at your life or what's visible to the outside, there's a lot of colorful kind of approaches within your life. You travel a lot. You do a lot of jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of passion behind your day-to-day life. Am I on the right track here?
I mean, I feel like life has worked out for me in a funny way because I've always chased what I loved. And that was kind of the way what my parents always said is if you make your life what you love, then even if you don't make money at it, you're going to be happy and you're going to be good at what you do. And somehow that's worked out. I don't think that necessarily works out for everybody, but I feel very fortunate to have worked out great for me. So yeah, I've chased my dreams my whole life.
So do tell, what do you love about life? What is the one thing or two things that tick you, that really kind of make you or allow you to wake up every morning and have a smile on your face and have that passion that's so visible?
I love travel. I love seeing how different people view life, how different people experience and what they enjoy, how they interpret life. You know, I love, skiing and mountain biking, and I ride moto, and I'm obviously obsessed with Jiu Jitsu. I just love kind of having the different experiences and sharing that with people and kind of watching how they interpret, what this whole thing's about.
How often do you ski?
Growing up, I skied 100 days a year. Now I ski on a good year, maybe 50 days, on a bad year, maybe 20, 30.
That's pretty good. I'm a skier, so I love skiing. I pre-pandemic, I was in Colorado at least once a year. So it's a big kind of passion for me. That's why I'm asking. But I'm always a little jealous of the Colorado guys because you guys are like 3 hours away from good skiing, not like Midwest over here. We have little bumps, So
yeah.
The views and the why are you laughing?
Because if Margaret ever gets transferred to Colorado, unfortunately, I'll have to say goodbye.
Is that your ticket out?
My wife went to school there for 2 years. We visited, and I think that's really the only place that would get me to be like, okay, we're uprooting the family. Is probably Colorado.
Yeah.
So be worried.
Yeah. Is it?
I just got back from Japan skiing, and everybody in Japan was like, "You're from Colorado? What are you doing here?" So, it's always a little bit greener on the other side, right?
It always is. Speaking of your Japan trip, we were just making, we were smiling and laughing about the video that you posted. One of the individuals who was with you was crossing the river, and it was kind of an interesting scene. I see you laughing right now. Do tell what in the world happened there.
I'm going to say maybe he did that just for our own benefit. So what we were doing in Japan is we would take the ski lift up about 1,000 meters, 3,000 vertical feet, and then we would hike about another 3,000 vertical feet, and then we would have a 6,000 foot run down backcountry. So it's all fresh. Nobody's really skied where we skied. But a lot of people weren't doing it because the rivers are still what they call open. There's not enough snow in them to bury the rivers. So you have to be very careful because it forms a natural trap where you can have snow fall in on top of you. Or if it's deep water, you can get stuck in there, kind of like a sand trap, and you can't get out. And if the water's deep, you could drown. So it's always a bit of a concern. So when we were going in there at the top, it's great snow, everything's wonderful, and 6,000 feet is a lot. So when you get to the bottom, it's kind of like spring, the rivers are running, and you have to get back and forth across this river because it's very steep on both sides. So you're trying to find ways to get across the river. And I'm not used to that so much. I'm horrified of falling in the water. And that was kind of like our buddy who lives out there. And he definitely didn't do it on purpose, but it was very soothing to me because, the rocks were super slippery where we were because we couldn't find a place to ski across the river. So you had to actually try to walk across, but you're balancing on rocks and they're super slippery. So he took his first step and just fell right in the river on his left side. And then he got up and took his second step and fell on his right side. So, and then to see he's all right, a little cold. But it really, it eased my stress level. You were talking about being stressed in the beginning, and stress is relative, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's. Did he have his ski boots on?
Oh yeah, you don't want to take them off. Then you're really.
That's why I'm asking because it's not easy to walk in those along, going across the river.
You step in the water and you can feel the cold water kind of rush in, but then after a while, it's just kind of soggy a little bit, but it gets warm. The boots actually insulate pretty well when they're wet, which I know a lot better now than before my trip.
It's all about the experiences, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the experiences that we have. Listen, you one of the guys who actually, if my research was done well, you're one of the very first guy who got the black belt from Renzo Gracie. Is that accurate statement there?
Man, I was the 7th human to get my black belt from Renzo Gracie.
So that would, I don't know the exact math here, but that would simply state that you've been on the mat for a while.
Yeah, I started before the UFC, which I think was uncommon. There was a small handful of people who had trained. I think there weren't that many schools on the planet outside of Rio de Janeiro. So I started in like 91, probably.
And where was that?
In Santa Fe, New Mexico, there was a Navy SEAL by the name of Marcos Gonzalez who had moved to Santa Fe. He was an ex-Navy SEAL. He'd moved to Santa Fe to study acupuncture, and he had gotten his blue belt from the Machado brothers. And so I was very fortunate. He came out. I was doing Thai boxing at the time. I had just had my first fight in which I'd fallen down a couple of times. And so I thought, well, if someone wanted to put me on the ground, I put myself there on accident. So it'd probably happen. And then when I fell, I won that fight, but I was beat up. I felt like I was hobbling around, blocking leg kicks. And when I tried jiu-jitsu, I mean, he just completely crushed my soul, as anyone who's trained with, as a rookie, crushed my soul in a very gentle and delicate way. I wasn't even injured, so I fell in love immediately.
So was that first class, or the intent of getting into jiu-jitsu, was that intentional, or was it more stumbling upon because of the circumstances of you being part of a fighting environment or a fighting training camp?
So it boggles my mind these days that people who do jiu-jitsu have no idea. Like, they've never seen Gracie in Action 1. Have you guys seen Gracie in Action 1?
I have the DVD on the shelf here.
Thank you. So, but back in the day, wasn't DVDs, it was VHS tapes. And the thing about them is when each time you copy them, they get more snowy, more fuzzy.
Oh, yeah.
So you could barely see what was going on. And especially back then, there was so much bullshit in the martial arts going around that you watch this tape and it was hard to believe it looked so amazing. And then this guy came to town and they're like, this guy does Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And we tried it out. And sure enough, it was like, wow, that really works.
So talk about the very first time when you go into that place, wherever it was, and you have some expectation of what is about to happen, right? But obviously, what's going through your mind when you have this experience?
Well, look, at that point in time, there might have been maybe Craig Kukuk was in New York and everyone else was in California. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't many. It was like the Machado brothers were all in one school in Redondo Beach. Jorge Gracie was there and had a school. Let's see, Rodrigo's dad, I can't remember his name right now. He had a school somewhere. I mean, there was probably less than a half a dozen schools that did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the entire country. And they were working, like Horian was teaching out of his garage. It was a tiny school. Mm-hmm. So there was not a lot going on at that point in time. So we had a Muay Thai school. When I say we had, I trained at a Muay Thai school, and this guy came out and gave a class. So it wasn't like today you walk into a school and everybody knows jiu-jitsu except you. No, nobody knew jiu-jitsu. And this one guy came in and whooped all of our asses and we were sold.
How familiar were you with jiu-jitsu? Were you did you guys start on your feet? Did this guy take you down and then you got your lesson? Was it everybody sitting around and showing you things, or was it this guy just took it to everybody? Back in the day,
I think it was a lot like the Gracie Challenge. So It was how we started our school too. It was a good learning curve for us, but you start out and you go, hey, look, usually we start on our knees and we shake hands and then we train and you kind of explain what tapping is and you move on from there. But if you want to go standing up and we do takedowns also, we can do that. Or if you want to put gloves on and be able to punch, we can do that. Or you can no gloves, and we can do no rules, whatever you want to do. Like that was how it always worked. So it was kind of that way. I'm a nice guy. I'm not super confrontational. So I was like, all right, cool. You tell me how it's done. And then we started from our knees. But like I said, I just had my first Muay Thai fight. And in that fight, I ended up on the ground twice, either on top of the guy once or below the guy once, just because slipped and fell or however it was. So in my mind, that was something that was a high probability of happening. I hadn't wrestled before. And so, yeah, that was how it worked. So I just started on my knees because I'm a nice guy, but you always get some clown that wants to start, Lord knows how, Wow.
But that's very different from what we do today. I mean, things have changed. Things have evolved quite a bit. And I often feel that, people who do start jiu-jitsu today, they're in a way spoiled, right? We have these systems that we have created, and everything is done really to paint a successful path for the student, for the individual who wants to train jiu-jitsu or any type of striking at this point. Life was much more rough way back, 30 years ago when you were starting or
I love that. How about like 200 years ago when maybe I don't know how long, but a small percentage of the population knew how to read.
Right.
And then you had schools where they're like, we're going to teach you how to read. And then they started doing it in a way that everybody could learn how to read. And today everybody knows how to read. Do you think the people that actually learned how to read way back in the day were spoiled? I'm not sure. But I think like we present it in a way that I say, if you show up, you could be the most uncoordinated guy in the world, total pacifist. You can get good at jiu-jitsu. So it's easily accessible. And yes, it is a little bit, you could say spoiled, but I guess it depends on perspective.
Well, what I mean by that is that, listen, 20 or 30 years ago when you were starting on myself, there was a little roughness around this, right? We didn't cater as much towards the student. It was more of a survival kind of mindset. Listen, if you can stick around long enough, you're going to learn this, versus today, it's much different. We do cater towards the student. We do want them to be successful, wherever they come from or whatever their mindset or goals are. It is a little bit more, there's a system around this.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think that people think that way of our society as a whole, that everyone's kind of spoiled now. But I think that's a little bit topic. I think we sound like old men a little bit when we speak like that, because we're like, back in my day. That's true, and it's not true. There's different challenges going on today.
For the record, you two might be old. I'm still young. I'm still, listen.
So you've never said that? You've never went, when I learned jiu-jitsu.
Hey, listen, I say it daily.
Either here or on the mat. We have to hear it.
That's right. So, as all of this is unfolding, and obviously you have a lot of passion behind jiu-jitsu and many, many, many years, what do you see as this one fundamental change that is taking over the period of 30 years that you started in that garage or in that very small place where nobody knew, to the point that now where, you have a successful business under the jiu-jitsu umbrella? What has changed? What has evolved in this one main thing in your mind?
I believe people are taking care of their students. Like I like to explain it, or it was explained to me very much in the law of the jungle or the law of the farm, right? On the jungle, the strong survive and the weak might die, and however it works. But the law of the farm is that, and the way, my favorite way that I heard the story was that Renzo Gracie had 21 kids and he couldn't let any of them not survive. And so he had to make sure that all of them had the tools to be successful and happy in life. And so he couldn't let, say, the bottom 40% die because they weren't strong enough, or not learn because they weren't strong enough. So he had to present jiu-jitsu. He also started as a frail, small, weak guy. So he had to present jiu-jitsu in such a way that every one of his, I say sons because it was a very chauvinistic era, but every one of his sons could learn jiu-jitsu and survive and thrive. And they all did, which was pretty amazing. So I believe, and the way I explained, is that he created an environment that was more like law of the farm, where you had to make sure that everybody was successful throughout that. as opposed to the law of the jungle, where it was just like like a wrestling room, a wrestling room, high level wrestling room. You don't care. You might need some fodder in there to beat up, but for the most part, you need champions in there. And if you're not strong willed and you don't have what it takes to be a champion, then we just need to beat you out of the room. And that's just a different mentality. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but one is going to help a lot more people. It's debatable that a lot of the people in that garage are just going to turn out to be meatheads anyway. You got, I don't know, Phil Baroni, or I shouldn't even be naming names, but somehow he's on top of mind.
Well,
you get guys that jiu-jitsu's, that was rough. I'm sorry. That was a low blow. Jiu-jitsu, it has the potential to teach the little guy to be able to beat the big guy, or the weak guy to give him confidence. I think the guys that survive in like a really tough room right from the beginning are not that guy. The guys that survive, they're already tough guys. Like they could just have their martial skills could have just been washing dishes their whole life, and they're still going to whoop some ass, and they're still confident that they can do so. So the lessons they're going to get are different than the lessons that, the nerd who's been stuffed in the closet, stuffed in the trash can his whole life is going to get from learning jiu-jitsu. So I think the biggest change has been there's schools, a lot more schools that are really taking care of the students to try to teach everybody jiu-jitsu.
How do you develop a culture like this? You talk about catering towards everybody. And considering what the world that we live in, where diversity of people is so large, and a spectrum between personalities and needs and who we are, where we want to be, and desires and goals and all those things in life, it's so wide. How do you create an environment where everybody feels, one, they feel safe, two, they're actually productively working and showing up, and they are willing to come and do hard things, because jiu-jitsu is hard. How do you do that so it is successful and everybody feels that they are needed, that they should be there?
It starts with, like I said, just wanting to teach people something. I think a good way to think about it is, if you guys have kids?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're going to teach your 3-year-old who's just learned to walk, and you want him to do jiu-jitsu, so you're like, all right, I'm going to start working with him with jiu-jitsu. How do you do that? Like, do you just beat his ass day one? And then like make him do it again the next day? Freaking by day 7, he's wrestling bears with Khabib. Like not all kids are going to thrive in that manner. So, at the same time, jiu-jitsu is, you're going to get your ass beat a lot, but you have to kind of plan those ass whoopings out a little bit. Like you take your 5-year-old daughter and you're going to have a foot race with her. Man, we have such long legs and powerful muscles compared to a 5-year-old, most of us. You should be able to crush them. So do you crush their soul when you race with them? Or do you set it up in a way where they maybe experience some failure? Maybe you win sometimes, maybe they win sometimes, but you hope to motivate them in a way, and then of course, you don't want to baby them so much that they can't handle losing, or they don't know what it feels like to be crushed. But I think day one, you don't need to crush somebody's soul. So I think you just kind of have that same mentality. Like, how am I going to make this individual standing in front of me a better human or better at jiu-jitsu? How are they going to get it? And you got to look at them and be like, what does this person need? If I give them a total ass whooping, are they going to come back? And if I give them, if I baby them too much, are they going to come back? And there's a balance, and it's not the right answer. It's not the same answer for everybody, but that's where it starts. And then you have to figure out systems, because you can't make just a blanket decision, and you might lose some people one side or the other. But depending on who you have, who's teaching the class, for example, we have, lots of people that teach under our umbrella. Depending who it is teaches the class, they might have a different interpretation about how that works. And if you just let that be free reign, that might look real different. So then you have to try to think, how are we going to create systems where people are going to overwhelmingly have a positive experience, and you can slowly build them up so they're getting more and more challenged, so they get to the point where they can get smashed and still have a good time, where they understand when they're giving somebody too much of a beating, and that person might be overwhelmed that day to the point where they're going to, decide that the ukulele would be better for them than jiu-jitsu.
That might happen too. But you talk about actually knowing the people. You talk about knowing your students, talk about knowing your clients and what they need and how to serve them in the right way. How come not everybody does this? I mean, that's the mind-blowing part to me. It is, if you look at jiu-jitsu academies all around the world, or even just in this country, there are many that don't even take that approach even remotely.
Look, we're all influenced greatly by our personal experiences, right? Like each of us sees the world through our own individual and unique lens. And I think maybe if you're somebody who's been an amazing athlete your whole life, you're going to have a very different perception about how it is for somebody, the total nerd who's never been successful at anything physical in his whole life and what that person might need to excel. So I think being empathetic and being able to put yourself in different people's shoes and trying to be able to see the light through whatever lens they might see is probably greatly helpful. And I don't think that's somebody that everybody does a great job at. I think that we could all do a better job of understanding other people's perspective, myself included.
So what do you think you can do a better job at?
The same thing. I need to, just trying to see other people's point of view and other people's perspective and not just trying to, I think as we get older, we tend to get less elastic, both physically and mentally. And I think that it's important to be able to see different points of view, different perspective, try to understand where they come from, not think that the way we think is the only way or that is necessarily right or get too stuck in our own dogma.
Gary, did you hear that?
Yeah,
don't get stuck in your own way.
Well, we have the age range of this show that guests we've had have been people in their 70s and people in their early 20s. And we've talked to a lot of those younger people where, the three of us are a little bit older. We hear all the time, younger generation this, younger generation that. And it's like, no, we've had, dozens of kids in their 20s and early 30s on this show who are proving those stereotypes wrong. And we're also always influenced by people our own age or whatever that have these ideas of what the world's turning into. And for me, I always think that they don't know what they're talking about, because I'm in a room with 20 to 30 kids every day that are working hard, doing things that are difficult, getting beat up, and then they're coming back 2 days later. So all those people that I think that are out there saying this generation is weak or we're raising a bunch of whatevers, they don't know what they're talking about, because we see it here every day. And then these kids they go to wrestling practice after this. So stop it, take a look around.
In Portuguese, they always say, like, this is the Nutella generation. Like, it's weak, like they're soft. I disagree. I mean, I think to some extent, maybe in some ways you could see it that way, but it's just a different generation. They're going to learn things in a different way. They're going to see the world through different light. There's a great podcast or study, this guy, Dan Carlin. He's a historian, and he talks about Genghis Khan and the Wrath of Khan. It's like an 8-hour thing. And he talks about how Genghis Khan was this vicious, very successful warrior, and his children not so much, because they were spoiled and they'd grown up kind of with a silver spoon in their mouth. There is some truth to that for sure. I mean, I think that when I look at how I was raised compared to how I am raising my children, I have to be cautious not to make them, too spoiled. But we also, we want to spoil them to a certain amount. And I think that it's easy to look and say, well, they don't have to work. And it's also easy to look and go, oh, they have a lot of skills that I did not have. Mm-hmm. They've got solid jiu-jitsu skills. They're great at, they get to focus more on school. They're great at skiing, bike riding. Like, they have a lot of skills, which I did not get because I was working. It doesn't mean, better or worse. It's a different experience. I heard you talking at the beginning about being empathetic, and that when you think about what your problems are, they're really insignificant, right? And I think it's interesting in that, my problems are nothing. Like, my car broke down, boo-hoo, I have to freaking take an Uber to work today or whatever it is. And meanwhile, there's somebody in Ukraine who just got his house blown up, and has no place to live. The interesting part for that is, I measured my cortisol the other day, which is supposed to be the measurement of stress hormone, and it was high for the first time in my life. So I'm stressed. I have the most privileged life you could possibly imagine. I have nothing to complain about. Yet somehow I'm processing it in a way that is causing me stress. So, the generation, whether they're tough or weak or, however it is, those are very relative. So I think the more we can kind of put ourselves in other people's shoes and understand, the kids are spoiled, right? But we have the highest rate of suicide among children we've ever had in our lives. So something is stressful for those kids. So, we've all got lessons to learn.
You bring up a very valid point. I mean, this is all relative. And I think what's important about all of this entire topic, to keep in mind that our kids are post-product of what we have done and what we are doing, right? We are the leaders. We are the examples, right? So and you a moment ago, you said, the way I was raised is very different than how my children are being raised. Is that right or wrong? I don't know. I don't think we can judge that at this point of time. I think that's probably something that we are going to be able to see when our kids are older. Now, we might not be around for that, but it's kind of the results come much later, right? It's like the conversation of be a good dad. Whatever you do right now, you won't know if that's good or bad until probably 30 years from now. Right? It's like, that's the true result, right? Are these kids going to be independent? Are they going to be disciplined? Are they going to be driven? Are they going to provide a success to themselves and their families? Right? I just had a recent conversation with somebody about the whole YouTubing thing, right? It's like they want to be a YouTuber. They want to make millions on YouTube, and it started as a joke. But then I started reflecting on it that day a little bit later on, and I was like, in order for that to happen, there has to be a system in place. There has to be some intelligence put in it, which I don't know about. I don't know how to do that stuff, right? There are people who make millions doing that, and to us or to others might appear as like they're not doing anything because they don't have a legit, quote-unquote, job. So it's all about perspective, I think. And I don't know how we got on this topic. And we shifted away from jiu-jitsu, but it's about life, and it's similar to jiu-jitsu, I think.
We got on this topic because you asked what was the key to success, or maybe why our academies did well, or why, and it comes from that. It's about being able to see other people's perspective. And we took a left-hand turn into other ways. But really, it's the same thing on the mat. Like, what is going to help these individuals learn jiu-jitsu? And, in a way, or for me, it's not just jiu-jitsu, but I want to be a positive influence on their lives. Like YouTubers, there's some horrible people out there.
Oh, I agree.
I just watched the Vice TV on that guy, Andrew Tate, and I'm not a huge fan. But my kids had no idea. My kids think that a lot of stuff he does is cool. There's some horrible people that reach great success. I shouldn't even be saying his name, but anyway, in jiu-jitsu, I think we have to look at what is going to improve people's lives and make them a better human. Like, that's part of what I look at, not just teaching somebody to fight and arm bars and chokes. And I believe part of our success is also that. And being a better human, to me, means understanding, listening to, and seeing people's perspectives, appreciating their different ways of thinking and their different ways of being and cultural stuff and all that. I think jiu-jitsu has a great influence on all of that. And I personally think that, the better you have the ability to understand that and still, teach within the framework of legit jujitsu, the better success you're going to have and the more people you will serve. And, it's just better all around, in my opinion.
Well, then let me ask you flat out, how come not everybody is doing this?
Because everybody has different perspectives. Some people are very set in their own ways. They don't see it. Some people, maybe you were the best athlete, in the room since you were a small child. You have no idea what it's like to be, a weaker athlete. Maybe what was good for you is not the same as for everybody. So I think it gives you a very different perspective.
As this evolution continues taking place, right? So we talked about 30 years ago. We talked about recent now. Let's look in the future a little bit. Where do you see jiu-jitsu as a sport? Where do you see jiu-jitsu as business to continue going?
One of the cool things about jiu-jitsu is that you can go hard and not get hurt. So I believe there's a little bit of built in there to keep it from turning into total garbage. Like I would say the great majority of karate, for example, is junk. There's some great karate out there, but 95% of it is ridiculous. It's a total waste of time. I think in jiu-jitsu, because you can go hard and not necessarily have to hurt the other person, that there will be an element of reality in jiu-jitsu, and it won't turn into 95% junk, maybe just like 20% junk, because it's delicate making it user-friendly and keeping the essence. Like you're not learning jiu-jitsu if you're not getting your ass beat a lot. Mm-hmm. And you have to be okay with that. But if you're getting hurt, that's probably too much. Like you said, the next person on the show is an older person, who's been in jiu-jitsu maybe longer than I have. I always love to hear the perspective of how it looks when you're been doing it that long, and you have experienced the benefits of it and the bad parts of it after doing it for that long. I like to hear what that's like.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I'll be honest. This is one of the reasons why we continue having these conversations, hearing the perspectives of different individuals, whether young or older, been on the mat for decades, or maybe their mileage is just ridiculous beyond everybody else. I mean, all of this gives us a perspective of what the other person sees and how they view, one, life, but two, also jiu-jitsu, what their interpretation of this beautiful art, right? What their interpretation is. Are you planning?
Here's an example.
Go ahead.
For me, everybody kind of has, even their unique perspective gives them a different thing. Like, here, I'll put one out there. Gordon Ryan, maybe I cringed, especially when he first came out, or still, just at his arrogance and his aura at the same time, I look at it and I can try to respect and be like, wow, he's brought a lot of people to the sport. I don't think, he's brought a ton of people to the sport. He's done a lot of good for it in a lot of ways. You could say the same for, Conor McGregor. Yep. Or so, you can look at it on the tail end and say, I might owe a lot of my student base to Conor McGregor, or, however it is. I have actually a funny story. My 12-year-old is doing jiu-jitsu, and they did guillotine in the class the other day. And he said, I really have to learn that guillotine better. And I was like, I know somebody, because he's very resistant to training with me. I know somebody that could really help you with that guillotine. And he's like, who? And I'm like, well, he helped you a lot. He kind of got you into jiu-jitsu. I'm walking him down the road. And he goes, I know who could help me with the guillotine. And I'm like, yeah, who? And he goes, Gordon Ryan. And I'm like, duh.
So close.
Yeah. So now every time he's like, oh yeah, Gordon Ryan could show me how to do that. And I'm like, damn it. But yeah, that's why I said, I think, just using Andre Galvão and Atos for an example, I think their academy is hugely successful. I don't think they do it like I do. I don't think it's replicable for everybody. There's not space for that type of academy, but I think he does an amazing job. I think he probably helps a ton of people. I've never been to his school, but I imagine it's full of a bunch of freaking monster competitors. And it's a certain type of individual that does well in that school. And I'll bet he does wonderful.
Well, it all boils down to the product that we represent. I mean, right, and the group that we cater towards, right? Andre Galvão is going to have a very different demographic from a business perspective versus, the academy down the street or somebody on, in Europe, right? It's a different objective, different demographic you cater towards. And the moment we understand what we are selling and what we are doing to, and who we're selling it to, now we can be a little bit more successful, right? So, I'm sure
last night we had somebody come in for a trial class, and he had a bunch of questions after, and he was talking about MMA, and we were like, jiu-jitsu is our bread and butter. That's what we do here. If you're looking for MMA, maybe this isn't the place for you. And to have that kind of candor with people, I think is hugely important, because you don't want to present something to a person, get them to sign up, get them to be a member, and get them three months down the road to be like, where's these other things that you promised me? So I think that, like you said, catering to people is hugely important. And I think you have to be honest with what you are presenting and giving to people. To not,
Look,
go ahead.
If you go to a proctologist and he starts trying to treat your foot problems, you're probably with the wrong doctor. I think it's similar with jiu-jitsu, man. I think that a lot of us are empathetic and we want to help everybody. We can't help everybody. We have people that come into our schools that need a psychiatrist, not a jiu-jitsu, teacher. Too many, and then you have somebody that maybe wants to learn to, fight in MMA. That's the most important thing to them. And we might not be the right school for that. Or, so yes, you have to identify what it is that you think you do well, who you want to help. And then, if that's not really within your wheelhouse or there's not enough of them, then you're not going to make any money. And you know what? If you don't make any money, you probably don't deserve to make any money. And that doesn't mean you won't deserve someday, but you got some shit to learn first.
Oh, that's a big one. That's a powerful. Do you think jiu-jitsu is for everybody?
Look, I think it could benefit everybody, but I think learning to read benefits everybody too, I think it's a great art. I think it could really help everybody. I would like to think there's a space for most people in my academy, but there's some people that come in that I keep way too long. There's some people, and if you're wondering if it's you, it probably is. There's somebody
that's
who's
the truth.
I would say there's a bully in every room, and if you don't know who it is, it's probably it might be you. Take a good look in the mirror. So, is it for everybody? Man, I think it could help everybody, but there's definitely.
It goes back to the what we were just talking about. Is you might have somebody in the room who's 54 years old who wasn't ever, an athlete or always rode the bench. And they come in and they're looking for, you have to make sure that their goals and objectives are realistic, so that they can find that place in the room, so that they're not always like, for whatever reason they have to beat this 25-year-old wrestler. Well, it's never going to happen. It just isn't. And in order they need to come to that realization, I think sooner than later, because when it's later, it might be too late. It might be too late physically. They might be broken down mentally, and then you don't see them for 3 weeks and then they cancel,
they're going to leave the academy and have to go straight to the orthopod.
There you go.
Yep.
And then you did not serve them well. And of course they interpreted it in the wrong way. They couldn't figure it out.
It's not jiu-jitsu's fault. It's not, it's the
it might be the teacher's
instructor.
fault.
Yeah. It's or even their own fault, because they
Yes,
had unrealistic
100%.
ideals. I didn't start this till comes up all the time. I didn't start this till I was 46 years old. And it was a very
Good
quick,
work.
thank you. It was a very quick realization for me anyway, maybe because I did some striking and stuff when I was young, real young, that, okay, this isn't what I thought it was, but I can still do something here. I can still have fun and learn and get a workout and all that other stuff, but I'm not going to be, taking on these younger dudes that were great athletes in high school and wrestled in college. That when I'm with those guys, there's a different rule set. There's a different goal. I have a different goal with those guys than I do with other people.
You have to have realistic expectations or you will break.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like you can jump off of a chair with no parachute and do fine. You might be able to jump off your roof, but you keep going higher and higher, you're going to get hurt.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and that's often a big point for a lot of people, the contention point, unrealistic expectations, really setting the goal smart and correctly.
Mm-hmm. So I have an interesting just experience through that is that I have a ton of friends who were monsters in jiu-jitsu at a younger age. And we always say you have to leave your ego at the door. And I believe when you show up at a jiu-jitsu school, that's very true. Like if you can do that and you can be okay with losing, you're going to have much more success. But on the tail end of that, like you were a monster competitor and you're used to whooping everyone's ass. And now you're 40 and the new generation is coming up. And now you're going so freaking hard because you're used to that. And you're not able to leave your ego again because your ego gets fed as you get good at jiu-jitsu. So next thing you know, you're got this huge ego. You're not a white belt anymore. So everybody needs to bow down to you. And then the younger generation starts whooping your ass and you can't handle that. Sadly, I've seen too many people quit jiu-jitsu as black belts. And I think, it's a big ego problem and it's not an easy thing to deal with. I definitely have experienced and go through it myself. when I was on the mat whooping everyone's ass for 15 years, and now some of the new talent comes up and they're like, like that old man's not that good, and that freaking hurts. So, it's not linear necessarily. It's a very interesting, the whole thing.
Yeah, it is. I think Zenji Ribeiro talked about this on this show, but he essentially was talking about the mileage is as we gain more knowledge, as we go through this journey, as time goes on, well, we have to really acknowledge the fact that the mileage increases, the wear and tear increases on the body, and they don't go side by side. One is going up and the other one's going down, and having the ability to make these adjustments and be very selective so you can continue training, it's critical. And this could be, and I'm curious what you think, but I think this could be one of the reasons why a lot of upper belts quit, including black belts. Like you see guys getting to the black belt, and they are in their 40s and 50s, and they slowly fade out, fade away, and then at some point they do disappear.
I think you have to train in such a way, and look, I'm learning this, and I'm too young to speak of it. But in 30 years, it boggles my mind. I rolled with Renzo Gracie when he was 90. I would like to think that I will get there, but I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm training in such a way that my body is still going to be going like that. Like everybody, when Randy Couture was the champion, everybody's like, yeah, see, you could be the champion at 40. Not all of us can. We might even want to or think we can, but there's a reason that he's a freaking phenom. Yeah. And, he's not like the rest of us. I hope that's me. I can't really speak to that. So how you train and, how you train day in and day out for 20, 30, 40 years is going to be a great determining factor in that, as is your ego and whether you can train it such a way that it's manageable and sustainable for your physical body.
I love it. Well, we've been at this for almost an hour as we slowly creeping into the ending part of the episode. What we do every single time we have a guest on the show, we have a little question for you. And the question comes from our previous guest, and they had no clue there will be you answering the question. So it's going to go question in blind, but Gary's going to take a lead on this. Let's see how this is going to unfold.
Speaking of blind, I had to put my glasses on. So Michelle Nicolini's question for you is...
First, let me say, that's pretty awesome. Michelle Nicolini, part of the younger generation, absolute rock star in Jiu Jitsu. I'm flattered that she unintentionally is asking me personally a question.
She wanted to get it out of us who it was going to be, but we don't cave on that one.
Doug, we can't remember his name.
So she wants to know, and we touched on some of this already, but she wants to know what brought you to Jiu Jitsu, and could you imagine how big it has become since you started?
What brought me to Jiu Jitsu is I was in kind of a white minority school where, I got picked on a lot. I was a small kid. I graduated high school when I was 16 years old. So I did not, kind of develop until after high school. So team sports were not for me. I was probably stuffed in the trash can a couple too many times. My parents put me in martial arts so I could learn to not get stuffed in the trash can so many times. So I was a result of that. I think that made me gravitate towards both individual sports and jiu-jitsu in particular. And what was the second part of the question?
Can you believe how big it's become since you started?
Mind-boggling. What an awesome trip it's been. I talk to my kids about trying to choose your profession, and I think back to when I lived in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and all of the, all my friends that became black belts and started out at that school. I moved there in 95, and how almost like so many of them are successful and run schools and are like happy and healthy and have good finance. It's so cool to see. There's no way I could have imagined that. We were just a bunch of kids training our asses off and having fun.
At which point, let me spin off of that. At which point did you know that you will be doing jiu-jitsu professionally, that this will be your livelihood?
So I committed to a lot of different sports. I was 100% all in with skiing. I was all in with kayaking, where that was, I felt like I was, metaphorically what we would call a black belt in those arts. Like I was as good as I was going to get. Maybe I wasn't, the champion, but I was high level in those things as well. But I didn't see a way that I was going to be able to pay my bills through those. And I don't think I admitted it to myself in jiu-jitsu. I went to school for acupuncture. I thought I was going to do that, but I definitely knew there was good potential. And then when I started teaching, at that point, I realized like that was what I loved doing. I was going to be very good at it because I was very passionate about it. Not only my personally growth, but sharing it with others. And I felt I had a good aptitude for teaching. And then I realized, so after I'd, as soon as I opened my school, I think when I was opening it, I was like, well, this is something I really love and I believe in. So this, this is going to be fun. I didn't think about it so much as far as, was this going to sustain me? Was I going to be able to quit my day job? But as soon as I started, things just went really well. And then I never turned back. I never had to have a real, what I would call a real job, but that's bullshit. What I do is a real job, right? I work my butt off, but I love it. Every aspect of it. Like I love from the, trying to learn accounting, marketing, all that, but through the lens of jiu-jitsu and through the objective of, of sharing the art with more people and helping people and just all the benefits that gets them and me.
Yeah, some of the students were making fun of me last night because they were like, "Oh, you don't work. You just hang out. You do jiu-jitsu for a living. You just chill back." And I was like,
right.
Man.
Well, we had Jeff Jeff Seraphin in here for a seminar, a couple months ago, and we were talking. We have mutual friends, and he said, "I've never had a real job." He went during college. He started fighting. And then he just taught jujitsu and then did it, opened his own place. And, it is a quote unquote real job. You've had a job your whole life. You've been busting your ass and now he's got great things happening for him. Yeah. But people don't see it. They don't see behind the scenes. They never do. Right. Nobody ever looks behind the curtain, and sees what's really going on. So,
yeah, if you're an MMA fighter, people might see that, 15 minutes of fame, but if you ain't treating it like a real job, you ain't going to do very well. But I empathize 100%. I've never had to sit in a cubicle either. And if it makes you smile, then that's awesome. I fortunately was able to not go that route. Have you guys ever taught, like, I'll never forget, I was teaching the kids class and you're like, man, you're lying to the kids, right? You're like, you could be anything you want to be. But you're a little bit, you're looking around and you're like, oh, I got 20 kids in my class. I think there's probably 14 Uber drivers sitting right in front of me, not all of you can be the president. Maybe one or two have like the smallest chance in the world. So you're lying to them, right? You're like, all right, you could be anything you want to be. Like, give me an example. You're like, what do you want to be, little Johnny? And little Johnny's like, and he's like, I want to be a jiu-jitsu teacher. And you're like, okay, shoot for the stars, bud, and how about you? And every single kid is like, I want to be a jiu-jitsu teacher. And you're like, oh my God, what have I done?
This is why I love kids' classes. Amal, it's been awesome hanging out with you last 60 minutes or so. Before we part ways, before we wrap this up officially, where can listeners find you? You're accessible online, websites, and so on. Talk about this a little bit. Where's your academy located? For anybody who hasn't, is not as familiar with you as they would like to, are you available to connect?
EastonTC.com is our academies. Our academies are across the Front Range of Colorado. So kind of the Denver, Boulder, all across the Denver metro is what we call it. So we have a lot of schools all across there, amazing people that we work with. Check us out. You can reach me on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram and you can find me, probably message me, and depending on if I deleted the app from my phone that day or not, I'll probably get back to you within a reasonable amount of time if you're polite. That's it, man. Come visit. Hell yeah, I'd love to see you on the mats.
Is that the regular occurrence? You deleting Instagram and putting me back on?
Man, social media is a battle, right? I mean, for me, it's one of the ills of, and this is where I don't want to be an old man, but I do feel like that platform of the internet where it gives you accessibility to the entire planet is definitely one of the things that, concerns me the most, or like the things that I wish the planet had not discovered. That being said, like my great friend Ricardo Almeida said it to me one day. He said, Amal, you can't have it both ways. Like you can't shop on Amazon and love having like, you know, lobster shipped to you next day from New England. And at the same time, like be upset with the internet because, you know, I feel like it's such a great force. It allows, like, if you have a horrible ideology, you can spread it to the entire planet, or you have a great ideology, you can spread it to the entire planet. So yeah, I have a battle with social media. I think all of us, like, how often do you lose your phone?
Never.
Probably not very often, because it's in your freaking hand all the time. If you're not, like, I feel like I need to lose my phone more. It's like, you know, like I'm one of my goals is to try to maintain real life connection, and you and I chatting on Instagram is not a real life connection. So yeah, I go back and forth on it. You know, I got rid of it a couple of days ago. I'm 2 days off. I'm on my high horse about how good I am with no social media. Tomorrow I'll break down and I'll have freaking 5 hours of phone time the next day.
It's definitely a struggle for, at least for me as well. So
yeah, if I didn't need it for work,
that.
If I didn't need it for work, I tell myself this, I wouldn't have it. But
that's what I tell myself. I'm like, no, I need it for work. And then I look and I'm like, holy shit, you put in an 8-hour day on the phone. I'm pretty sure that none of that matters for your work.
Yeah.
That's it. Hey, talk about being honest, right?
A lot of reflection here.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Mostly I'm talking to myself. Don't take it personally.
No, it's all right. I need it. I need this.
All right, Amal. Well, it's been great hanging out with you. We do appreciate you sharing your story, your life story, your journey, and your wisdom on all those very interesting topics. And, you know, if you're ever in Chicago area, I always say this, but if you're ever in Chicago area, swing by. I would love to have you in my academy. And, you know, it's not as beautiful as Colorado. I get that, but
yeah. It's awesome.
Wow, this is great. I watched the Chirac thing on YouTube. Have you guys seen it?
No, I don't need to.
Come on, it's about the murder. It's about the murder rap scene in Chicago.
It's awful.
I'm dying to go check it out.
We know somebody who worked as a Chicago police officer, or still does, and was very involved in that scene. And it's awful. It's awful what they're doing, but. There's a lot of, we're in the suburbs. I lived the first 46 years of my life in the city, and I love it. There's so much amazing, wonderful things going on in that city. So
I love Chicago. Chicago is awesome. I could be there. I didn't mean to give it a bad rap. Sometimes people say, oh, all the stories you tell about Brazil are like these freaking insane stories. And like, yeah, that was an exciting part of it. That's the part that, you know,
that's the titulating part. That's the social
so maybe
media
that's the part I tell, but that's not the whole picture. Obviously, I love Chicago. I would love to go visit. There's amazing blues in Chicago, great food.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I hope to visit you guys soon. It was a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you very much.
Thanks for doing it, man. We appreciate it.
All right. So let's wrap this up officially and formally, and we'll chat with you soon.
All right, gentlemen. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.